I'm overstimulated. Expect the long-awaited abolition of my brain.
But if mentally we synchronize, despite what we despise, there's a chance that maybe I won't go insane.
Hi, friends. Welcome to Mental Sync.
Hey, welcome to Mental Sync. It's the show with, I didn't think of anything.
It's the show with us.
It's the show
Talking
with
to
us.
you.
Here we are. We're back.
We never left.
We never left as far as you're concerned. But, oh boy, we have not recorded in, has it been 2 months?
It has been.
That's nuts. Because I was going to say the last time we recorded was before I left for Thailand.
Yeah, John went to Thailand.
I went to Thailand. Hey, what's up? That was like in January that I left.
Yeah. Like literally
Bananas.
this time, like, I think was like...
It was like the 28th.
Or something. Yeah, but like, I think we recorded the day before you left, didn't we?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So, hey, what's up? It's been a minute.
Well, yeah,
or a
for
week
us.
for you guys. Wow. What have we all been up to?
I have been up to many things.
Yeah, we just had a whole 2-hour session talking about TV shows, and now we're here just like, what's up? What's going on?
We got this. It's
we
fine.
got this.
We
Get
love
back into the
TV.
groove.
We love
We love
Pedro
TV.
Pascal. This is the Pedro Pascal fan podcast. And
Absolutely. Stan
I love
Pedro
him.
Pascal.
We stand. Anyway.
But more than anything else, we stan
The Wheel.
mental illness. Let's get into it. I didn't think that through until I said it. We stand discussion about
open
mental
discussion
illness. Open
around.
discussion. Let's just spin the fucking wheel. You ready?
Yeah. Yep, let's do it.
3, 2, 1, spin it, John. Let's go. We can't start the episode until you spin that fucking wheel. Let's do it already. Go. It's a weird energy
Here
today.
we go. Oh my god.
Sure.
Chronic illness.
You just had a whole... Oh, God. Okay. Chronic illness. Yeah.
So today's topic of conversation is, I was going to say mental illness.
No, not mental illness.
Chronic illness.
Chronic illness. It's the kind of illness that happens
That's
forever
chronic.
and doesn't go away. It's chronic.
So, the reason that John and I laughed so loudly about this when it landed on it is because we were smashing or passing things that we potentially could talk about, and one of them that was on there was medication. And I think when we created the medication category, God, I can't talk. I don't know what's happening to me today.
We just burnt out our talking abilities for the last 2 hours of catching up. And now we're here just like, oh no, we have to do a whole podcast.
Right?
Let's get it together. We got it.
That being said, the medication category was to be like, oh, I got put on this medication for my depression, or this medication for, my ADHD or whatever. We're going to talk about like those and how there's a stigma around that, whatever. That was the,
that was the idea
thing. So I was like, let's talk about like that on the wheel. And then as I was sitting there, I was like, that's not what I want to talk about in regard to medication, because for some reason it made me think about all the medications I've taken for like my rheumatoid arthritis and how like that's affected my mental health. And so I was like, John, I actually want to talk about chronic illness and how it's affected my mental health.
And so we
John
just put that on the
cool.
wheel as an option. It was just like, oh, cool. So that like on the off chance we land on that, it'll just say chronic illness instead. And then lo and behold, that's what we ended up with. And so, yeah, let's get into it. We both have a lot of shit going on in terms of chronic illness. We got a bunch of stuff. I mean, there's the, aside from the stuff that we typically talk about on this show. I mean, I don't know if you would call, I guess depression is a chronic illness, right? If you have chronic depression, right?
Yeah,
like,
but I guess like this is more like a physical illness, like
aside from like ADHD, anxiety, depression, all the fun stuff
that we all have.
Yeah, we all have. We've got the more niche physical ailments I guess I, for one, I feel like you've got a lot of shit to talk about.
Well, I think we both have a good amount of stuff to talk about.
Do. But I think my big go-to one is that I have had chronic migraines for a long time that are so much better now. They're so much better than they ever used to be, which was so good. But
yeah,
when
John missed like a forever amount of school.
I missed like my full sophomore year of high school.
And we had like one
Emily
class
alone.
together finally.
Yeah, and I left her all alone.
To fend for myself and do
because
science.
I couldn't walk or stand or focus or exist.
Excuses.
Excuses. Yeah, basically I turned 16. It wasn't like on my 16th birthday, but it was like that year.
You're punished.
It was like that movie where the kid turns 13 and becomes a mermaid. You know what I'm talking about?
I love that movie.
Yeah,
that was like one of my favorite movies.
Yeah. What is that called? Mermaid Tales.
I think it was called like, was it like Luck of
the 13th
something?
year? The 13th
year. That was a good movie.
AKA Mermaid Tales. But yeah, I was 16 and one night I was doing my homework and I was particularly stressed. And then I was looking at my sheet of paper and I couldn't see. And I was like, I can't read that. That's strange. I don't wear glasses. That's not usually what happens. But it's 1 a.m., so I'm probably just really tired. I'm going to go to bed. I went to bed, and the next day at school, I was like, I'm not able to see super well, and I feel kind of dizzy. And then just this, I was like, I have a headache. And then I just remember I was getting dizzier and dizzier, and I was like, I'm struggling. And I ended up going to the nurse, had my mom pick me up from school, and I was going home, and I was just like, I think I'm gonna go to sleep. And I went to sleep, and I woke up months later. Not actually, that's not really what happened.
Like kind of.
But kind of. I was not able to, eating dinner at the table, sitting up was like a victory, like once a week, a couple days a week or so. But I was basically just sleeping and watching TV, which sounds amazing, but like when you don't have the ability to do anything else, it can fuck you up a little bit. Ultimately thankful for that time, because it was due to that I did a lot of reflection and realized that I actually wanted to go into the television industry. That was a very formative part of my...
You never told me that.
Did I never tell you that?
I never knew
it was a very formative part of my self-discovery. I was in the engineering program in high school at the time, and there was a lot of discussion on, I left school in October. It was early October that the migraines started, and around January, they were like, hey, you got to start like tutoring, or you're going to have to be like held back. And I was like, I'm not having conversations very easily. Like, yeah, ultimately what it came down to was, maybe before I dropped the engineering program, but I was just at home watching a lot of movies and a lot of TV, because it was all I could do was like sleep and then like let information come at me. Anything else gave me like a headache to the point where I was going to vomit. And it was super fun.
Well, I was going to say too that I just wanted to inform you that the reason I thought that you were like always into film was not because of this, was just because of like drama club and all the music. And
I mean,
we always went to go see movies.
Yeah. In retrospect, it makes a lot of sense.
It does.
But
I didn't know that was your thing. Like, that was your...
it didn't really, I had no idea. I don't know. It wasn't something relevant enough in my life. Like that type of career was just such a, oh, well, yeah, sure. Everyone would love to do that. But
now sometimes I watch shows and I'm like, I would love to do what John does. And then I think about what you actually do. And then I'm like, I would not love to do what John does.
But yeah, I remember specifically I was watching like one of the Marvel movies. I think it was the Edward Norton Incredible Hulk. And it was on like FX on a Friday night, where like in the commercial breaks they'd be like, let's show you how we like, you'd see the behind the scenes footage of like the green screen and the pulley system they'd use to like make the character look like they're running faster, and all of this different stuff. And I just remember being like, I want to do that. And I had thought for a while, like, maybe what I want to do is like use my computer engineering knowledge to like do special effects, maybe. And I was like, that could be really interesting. Then after a while, I just realized how much I loved talking about the story, the writing, the dialogue. And I was like, maybe I want to write some stuff. And then it's because of that whole time that I tried writing a show. And that's when I wrote The Fall. I wrote a show, submitted it to our drama club advisor / English teacher, and was just like, oh, I wasn't expecting anything from it. I was like, oh, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And he's like, we would love to do this as our show. And that's when I wrote and directed and cast and did the whole fall show at the high school my junior year. And ultimately, getting back to, you know, my headaches, what the solution to, you know, the chronic illness, they were basically, after seeing all kinds of doctors, getting like MRIs, CAT scans, just ear, nose, throat doctor, just everyone looking at me and being like, yeah, you look healthy, you look fine. And I'm like, I'm not. I swear. Like, after a while, I just felt so fucking gaslit, where I was like, I just feel like they're telling me it's in my head, so to speak, and I just don't know. I started like doubting myself, honestly. And then I went to a chiropractor who then took scans of my spine and were like, oh, you're like, I think it was like C3 or something, like one of the vertebrae, I don't know. Yep. One of them, like toward the top of your head, like right, like at the base of your skull, basically, is pretty horribly out of place. Has anything happened in term, you know, blah, blah, blah. My mom was then like, when I was born, she revealed I had the cord like wrapped around my neck.
Oh.
Almost died, apparently.
Cool. Well, I'm glad you didn't.
Me too. It's super sick being alive. And, but apparently, so what the chiropractor told me is like, oh yeah, so like basically your entire life, you've had this very natural turn to your neck that has gotten worse and worse. She was like, you should have been having these headaches your entire life. But I think you've just been like suppressing them, and it built up to the point where it just all hit you at once, which is why it was so severe rather than having gradual headaches your whole life. And I was like,
interesting.
Oh.
I didn't even know that story.
Yeah. And so, oops. We've worked through a lot of repression and a lot of that. And I'm in a much better place now that I've learned that when my body is feeling a certain way, I need to acknowledge it and not push it deep down like us Irish Catholics have done for so many years.
Oh, yeah. What a lesson.
What a fucking lesson. What's wrong with you?
Well, I wanted to ask you, never mind. I guess I don't want to ask you something because I forgot what my question was.
Was it regarding suppressing my headaches? Was it regarding how it's affected my mental health?
That was the question right there.
That's a good question. Thank you for asking it. It's an important question. And if you didn't ask it, I was going to ask it. So thank you, first of all.
Cool. You're welcome. I'm glad I can provide something valuable to our podcast.
Man, well, what it definitely... I've always been existential, right? I've always been pretty wildly existential of, like, what's the point of everything? This did not help. Mm-hmm. This, in fact, worsened that, where
Fair.
I spent a lot of time, like, not genuinely thinking I was going to die, because it wasn't that bad.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was. Maybe I'm downplaying it. But, like, it wasn't bad to the point where I was going to die. I just, like, didn't know. And every time a doctor was like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with you, I just kept going to like, you know, like I felt like a patient in house where I'm just like, yeah, I just have some rare form of like brain cancer that they just have now. And I didn't like genuinely believe that, but it was impossible to shake that feeling.
Right.
And so the big thing that really did ultimately push me into the arts was sitting for the better part of a year thinking about how fucking short life is, and just kind of being like, man, sorry because this is dark, but like a lot of time was me thinking like, man, if I like, why am I'm spending so much time doing shit I hate, doing shit I dislike. And like, yeah, of course, like school, who likes school and like all this stuff, but I was pursuing these like specific interests like the engineering program because it's like just what I was kind of told to do, and I loved math and science, and I did have an interest, but I loved the classes my freshman year and I hated it my sophomore year. And I just remember thinking like, I have to keep doing this and I have to just keep being miserable and I just have to keep pushing through. And that whole period really was the beginning of genuinely starting to ask myself like, fucking why?
Yeah.
Like it definitely, you know, it's something that developed more as I got older, began to think about things more. The pandemic, you know, which was, you know, years after college, but the quarantine specifically really amped up my feelings of being determined that when I die, whenever that is, and also understanding that it could be unexpected, I just want to make sure that when I die, I have had more time in my life feeling happy and enjoying my life than not. And I think my sophomore year of high school, having those headaches, was a very sobering moment of realizing that wasn't the case, and not feeling like I had been more happy in my life than not. And I think it was really the beginning of my mental health journey.
Interesting.
What I do want to hear about also, though, is in terms of chronic ailments that you have been through, ones that have affected your more general mental health.
Yeah.
Hit me with it.
Yeah, so I have rheumatoid arthritis. And I was diagnosed at 2. Apparently I just like stopped walking. So my mom says, I don't remember it. And my mom was like, why is my kid not walking? So she took me to a bunch of doctors and they were like, we don't know. That's weird. And then I'm not kidding. So fun fact, rheumatoid arthritis is a very like, they've actually changed it. They now call it idiopathic arthritis because they're really not sure what causes it. And so it's also it's a very like, despite it being such a popular thing, like I feel like if you say to someone I have rheumatoid arthritis, they know it's not normal arthritis. They know that it's like something bigger, and it's well known that it's like a type of arthritis. But people don't realize that there's not a lot of there. And at the time when I was diagnosed, so like it was like 98, there wasn't a lot of research done, and they still didn't know a whole ton about it, and there weren't as many medications. So your options for treatment were things like NSAIDs, which are typically like the lowest base would be something like ibuprofen, a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, or steroids. Steroids are like the answer to everything sometimes.
Right.
I hate steroids, but that's a whole other conversation. And so basically, or cortisone shots, which are also just like that's a steroid, but like it's not like something you take. They have to give it to you in your joint and it hurts like a bitch. So that's that. But so there wasn't a lot of research, and they did know that they needed to like suppress your immune system somehow, but I don't know how they would have done that for me at the time because I was also so young and whatever. But yeah, so I had that till I was like 8 or 9, or sometimes I think it was actually 12, but I don't remember the actual like how old I was when I remissed from it. Like it just like went away. But it affected me and it's so funny because I always talk about this because I was re-diagnosed, right? And like when I first started college, and I always talk about that experience first until somebody asks me about like, oh, like, well, how did it affect you like when you were younger? And I almost repress those memories. Like I always forget about it until I'm like, oh yeah, that happened. So
yeah, because I was gonna say, as long as I've known you, you've been like a dancer.
Oh yeah.
Which is just fascinating. Like, because I knew this about you, but it's also like, yeah, I haven't really.
Yeah, well, I
connected those
should
dots.
also say that my juvenile rheumatoid arthritis is in my ankles, which is why when John says that, that's very significant to dancing.
Yep.
And
For those of you who don't know, dancing is typically done with your feet, ankles, legs, the lower limbs.
yeah, it's very true.
It's encouraged to throw a bit of shoulder in there too, but
Yeah,
it's
maybe
not as
some
necessary.
like jazz hands every now and then, but
A
that's-
jazz hand or two, a spirit finger, if you would.
Yeah. But so in elementary school, I have really traumatic memories now that I'm like, wow, there's a lot coming up all of a sudden.
Ooh.
These people, so I wasn't allowed to go outside for recess. I wasn't allowed to like go on the playground and stuff. I had to stay inside. Like I had to have a buddy, like that would sit inside with me in the office for recess. Because they were afraid of me like getting hurt. And like nobody wanted to stay inside with me because it was like, who does when you're in
Yeah.
elementary school or whatever.
All right, kids, all of you go out and play, but who wants to stay inside and sit in the office?
With Emily and some
Emily.
blocks, maybe. I
a
don't know.
block?
You can color. So I had to do that. And there was one time where they finally let me outside. It sounds so awful, but it's true. They finally let me go outside and play.
Out of my cage.
And I was on the monkey bars and I came down and I landed on my ankle wrong, like a normal kid would have, any normal kid could have. And they came outside with a fucking wheelchair and like wheeled me back inside and like made me, then I had to either be in the nurse's office.
Traumatizing.
Yeah, it was pretty traumatizing. So I had to do that. But specifically, I only really remember doing that 1 year. I think because the other year, because it was like one of the younger, like when I was younger. I couldn't tell you what grade I was in. I think it might have been first. I genuinely don't. I think it was like first grade. I genuinely don't remember though. But it was like a younger year.
Yeah.
And then after that, because it was more like, as the older you get, obviously the more independent they let you kind of be and do whatever. And so I was able to actually like go outside, but I wasn't allowed. They were like, don't do anything crazy. So I could go outside with everybody and like walk around, but I wasn't allowed in like the jungle gym. Things like that. So, I remember, I think I've blocked a lot of this out, to be honest, because I remember feeling very like I was inconveniencing people when I'd ask who would want to stay inside with me.
Yeah.
Because I was like, what kid wants to, you know? Is nobody really wanted to. Like, no, they genuinely didn't want to.
No, of course. What effect do you think that had on your overall, not like social capabilities, but mental health in like navigating social situations? And,
I think that because honestly, I just started thinking about this right before you asked the question. Because one of the things that I've always felt is like an outsider, even if I'm not. And I think it's because of this. Like, I was always had to be on the outsider. I always had to like get someone to like, it's almost like an approval. Like, do you want to sit inside with me? Like, do you want to hang out with me? Like, am I good enough for you to want to sit inside and like you lose your recess time?
Right.
Right? Like, am I good enough? Like, do you like me enough? Am I validating enough to you? Do you know what I'm trying to say? I don't know how to explain that.
No, like the idea of, I don't know. It's just a lot of like questioning your own worth because like, you know that you need certain things, but you have to ask. It's the idea of like being forced to be in a situation where you have to ask people to prioritize you over themselves, your happiness over their happiness.
Yes.
Because it's not something you need. You don't
No.
need a friend.
No, but
Like,
they'd always be like, who wants to stay inside with Emily? Like,
right.
fuck you.
That's right. Like
Nobody wants to stay inside with Emily.
You like hanging out with you became in your mind, not necessarily true, but in your mind became the cause for people, like a punishment almost.
Right.
Like, you know, staying inside and not going out to recess is what you do to punish kids. It's what you do to say, oh, you lost your recess privileges today. You have to stay inside in the office. and that was being equated to hanging out with you, and that's like definitely damaging. Like
and I think too the other thing about that was like I remember also like people didn't like what kid's gonna understand what I'm going through. I couldn't even pronounce what I had. Like like I would be like, oh, I have some sort of issue. My ankles hurt basically.
I'm just all messed up
basically. But so people would be like, did you like break your leg or something? Because I'd often come in with like my
crutches or
no, not crutches. I would just have ace wraps, like ace bandage wraps on my ankles for support, because you know, because I was also going to physical therapy like I think 2 or 3 times a week. Man, I'm having like a lot of flashbacks all of a sudden. Which is okay, because I think it's good, but I definitely think that I've repressed a lot of that because I try to think about it like a little bit more and try to remember more right now, and I really can't remember more than those specific things. But the other things that were like really traumatizing to me was like I was in and out of the hospital all the time getting tests, and like I needed cortisone shots. I've had a couple of them as a kid, and when you're a kid, because they're quite painful, they give you anesthesia, so they like knock you out for it, which was fine. But I have very vivid memories of, and like negative memories of like being put under, because I was so scared and I really didn't understand what was happening, and so I'd fight it and I'd be like, I don't want to. I'd be crying, like very hysterical, upset about it. And then I'd always like wake up, I'd be in like post-op, and I'd wake up from it and I'd just be in such a bad mood. And there was one day, if there's anything my mom is the realist for, my mom's done a lot of great things in my life, don't get me wrong, but one of my favorite memories of this whole experience, to be honest, is we were coming home after a cortisone shot, and I had spilt something all over me, like all over my pants, and I was devastated because I was wet and uncomfortable, and my mom got out of the car and took her pants off and gave them to me, despite them being 7 sizes too big. And so my mom drove home in her underwear, and I was wearing her pants. And I remember that she pulled over like a parking lot.
Very
so funny, because I was hysterical that I spilt whatever it was all over me. Because they, you know, when you wake up, they give you a popsicle or whatever it was. I can't even remember. It was some type of juice, I think. But I was so upset.
Here's I think the next part of maybe what we get into, just because it's like 3:45. We got a minute, but we've got a ton of stuff that we could get into, and I don't think we have time in this one episode to just list all of our chronic, you know, we've got stuff going on with our bodies, weak like limbs naturally, our brains, our immune systems. But what we started to get into is like how does something like that affect you long term in terms of, you know, what it's like to be a kid going through stuff like that, feeling different, feeling like you need special treatment?
Well, what I was going to also talk about quickly after that was just that I did remiss and had this sense of normalcy for like a little while. But I did always feel like I don't ever remember feeling like I belonged. Like I always felt like I had to like work to, like I had to prove why I was worthy of being around someone. And that only gets harder the more that you go through, you know, like grade school, because of just how everything is. And so I always had like a few very close friends. But I don't think I'm realizing until this moment that we're talking about this, how much it actually did affect me. And I think the other thing too, that I just, because the other problem with my issue, okay, let me just explain the rest of my story really quick. So I was re-diagnosed right when I started my freshman year of college. It's a very specific pain. It doesn't feel like normal, like I sprained my ankle type of a pain. I don't know how to explain it. There literally is no way to explain this. And when I was re-diagnosed, it was a little bit more severe than previously, because I don't know why, but it was. And that meant that I had to take some hardcore drugs for that. And I like really struggled with just certain aspects of that, because one of them is like a very low dose of chemotherapy. And I started like losing my hair, like not a lot, like don't get me wrong. Like I wasn't pulling out like all my hair, but my hair thinned, and like I would go like this across my eyebrows, and I'd pull out hair on my eyebrows. Like I have patches on my arm that like never grew back, which isn't supposed to happen if you're on that low of a dose, but my body just didn't react well to it. and then I had to do like injections and all this other stuff. But the reason I bring this up is that I also have an invisible illness. So like you wouldn't look at, like, it's a disability, right? In a sense, like you wouldn't look at me and say like, oh, she has some like obvious ailment and she's in pain.
Right.
I'm not wearing a
the
cast.
way you're physically like going
presenting.
About your, yeah.
So what I struggled with in college, living in Boston, is public transportation, because in busy hours, it's packed. Now I have a right, because I am disabled in a sense, and when I was actively in pain, to sit in one of like the handicap seats. But because
you
I
have
didn't
to explain that to strangers
who think
like,
I'm a young 20-year-old who doesn't have any issues
between you and some kid that just wants to sit down.
Right. And like the difference, so there were like one specific example. The reason why I bring this up is because this is what has affected my mental health the most, I think, is talking about it, or being comfortable or open enough to be like, no, I struggle with this idea. Because I wouldn't, like, I've never asked for like a handicap pass for my car.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, cause I'm like, wow, like people definitely do have it way worse than I do. There's like, you can always say that about anything, but that doesn't make my experience like invalid, or my pain invalid. Not. Because so when the Patriots won the Super Bowl, they had like the Patriots parade or whatever. And so we went downtown Boston, and we were standing out there in the cold in February, and the cold and my ankles just don't mix. And I was in so much pain.
That's a thing. That's definitely a thing.
So much pain. And we were on this, you can imagine, after all those people downtown trying to get back to wherever they came from. And we took the T to get back to, you know, our dorms at the time. And I was in so much pain, like there was just silent crying, just tears that I like couldn't control. You know what I mean? And my friend, one of my best friends, Mo, she like actually advocated for me, because I was like, I really need to sit down. And there was nobody sitting in that seat because they kept it open, you know, because everybody does. Like nobody's going to sit there if just in the off chance, despite how crowded it was. And so I sat down, and then somebody got on the, somebody who had like it was like an older gentleman who had like a cane, but he wasn't like, I'm not like saying he wasn't in pain or anything, but like it was one of those things where he was fine standing up, and somebody told me that like in that moment that I was like being rude because I should offer him the seat, not knowing that I was in like excruciating pain. Like, and I can deal with pain for a while. But I was in absolutely excruciating pain, and I don't say that quite often at all. Like I don't ever really am like, no, that like I'm in a lot of pain today. Like I'll be like, oh, I'm uncomfortable, like my ankles hurt, whatever. But no, I was done for. And it was before I was on any medications. I was still trying to figure out if this is what this is. Like I was struggling, and someone started like kind of just being like, you should get up and let him sit down. And then luckily my friend Mo, she spoke up for me and was like, she's in a lot of pain. Like she has something going on. Like she deserves to sit here right now. And then she asked the guy too, like, hey, are you all right? Like to stand, like my friend's in a lot of pain. Like she's hurt, whatever. And he was like, yeah, I didn't care, type of a thing. Like, but like somebody else took it upon them. But that also made me feel invalidated, because I was like, do I deserve to sit here? When the answer is yes.
The answer is yes. But it's also like, man, it's hard. It's very hard to, you know, as someone, I think my equivalent, not exactly to that, but like I just have severe immune system issues and will just get sick all the time. And it always affected me in school. I always missed a bunch of school. And then entering like the workforce, it was very tough to explain like why I have to keep missing work. And you know, it's I don't know, it I think the way that things like that affected me, number one, from like missing so much school, I felt like an outsider for just like often not having the same social connections other people had, for a lot of reasons, for a lot of other reasons too. But I think what it kind of I can't think of the word. What it sparked in me a little bit, I guess, is whereas you felt socially like you had to like prove to people that you were like worthy of whatever, of their attention, and you know, it was similar for me. But I think what it kind of sparked was this inherent, like, my default is, oh, I'm not. And like communicating to people that I was self-aware, at least, that I was weaker in some sense, needed more assistance in some sense, and trying to, not look pathetic by at least showing my awareness of it. And so now I feel like where that's developed to, it's something I'm still very much working on, is I have this constant need to communicate what I'm, not like what I'm going through, but like what I'm going through, like like, oh, I'm sick for these reasons, I'm feeling this thing because I'm so afraid of being in other, like, people not understanding why I'm acting the way I'm acting, or etc.
Well, I can speak to that a little bit in a couple ways, and one of them being, like, when I was still kind of going through certain treatments to figure out, like, what was going to work for me or what was going to, like, be the best. I mean, you're suppressing your immune system, so I would get sick often. And I think the other side of this is people don't realize, like, you think arthritis is like, okay, maybe people have, like, achy joints, and it's like, no, my immune system is eating away at my joints. Like, I have, and, like, another aspect to that is I have permanent joint damage that was, like, it's unpreventable. Like, as much as you can slow the progression of the disease, it's still doing damage every second that you're inflamed or you're having an episode. And so, like, even now, like, people, because I'm in remission again, thank God. Like, I'm not on any meds and everything's, like, okay. But one of the things that I'll say, like, sometimes, and a lot of people just, like, don't understand, is I'll be like, no, I'm really hurting today. And it's not, I'm having an episode, it's, well, no, I overdid it, and my joint damage doesn't like that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's the only way I can explain that. Like,
that makes perfect sense.
I have less of a joint, so, like, the more I stand on my feet and the more I do whatever, like, the more bone-to-bone contact that's kind of happening, and it's painful. Yeah. And the other thing is, like, part of me wonders sometimes, like, when you're applying for a job and it's like, do you have a disability? Do I disclose this? Will it bite me in the ass later if I don't disclose this and I need to take time?
Right. Or will it bite you in the ass later if you do disclose it?
Exactly.
And
And because they can't, like, so I typically say, no, I don't have a disability, but I also now have been struggling that with my ADHD because I do have another disability. And it's like, do I tell people so that I have somewhat of an excuse? But that also, it's like, they're not supposed to discriminate, but people do anyway. Like, it's just a whole thing.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to bring up, aside from just that, is, like, another thing that I struggled with in college more so is relationships. Because I was going through something alone for the first time because my mom lives in Connecticut and I'm in Massachusetts. And it's like, I talked to my mom about it. I'm going to see this doctor, but I'm essentially doing this alone. Like, I had friends who'd go, like, Kaylee would go to me to my appointments. And it was just like, Kaylee was there the day that I got diagnosed. And she was there. She's been there through, like, out it all. And actually, my doctor still asks about her sometimes. She'll be like, how's your friend with the nice eyes? That's what he always says. I keep telling her she's going to have to go back to an appointment with me. But so I was, like, navigating this on my own. And it was like, this was also when my mental health started to deteriorate and really exacerbate some of the other things that I was already experiencing, like depression and anxiety wise. And it's when I started having panic attacks because it's like, I felt so alone. I didn't have anybody to talk to. And I lived with this one girl who I really loved. And, like, we were really close friends, and she started to get super annoyed, and she would tell people, like, oh, well, all Emily can talk about is her arthritis and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, I'm so tired of hearing about it. It's such, like, a letdown. It's like, okay, like, I hear you, and I'm sorry that I've made you uncomfortable, but it's like, I was having such a hard time living in my own experience that I didn't know what else to, like, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Like, I was scared too, because this is a disease that doesn't just affect your joints if it goes untreated, it affects your organs, and, like, it can, like, cause heart damage and, like, just, like, liver damage. And the medications that I'm taking, I had to be monitored, like, weekly. I had to go get blood work every week to ensure that, like, my liver function tests were good, like, because it's so these medications, as much as they're going to help your disease, they're also so damaging to the rest of your body. It's like, what do you want, to not be able to walk? Or
right,
and it's like, it's a risk you kind of have to take. Like, does this risk outweigh, like, the benefits, or does the benefits outweigh the risk? Like, what do you kind of have to like decide for yourself. And me being like
a lot to be
19,
grappling with. Like
I was
it's
19 trying to figure
Yeah.
this out. And also on top of that, like when I'm having an episode, like just a flare up and my joints are inflamed and everything's like painful, I'm also exhausted. Like I can barely even open my eyes. And I don't know, like, and I know this is, I mean, it's an autoimmune disease. It's affecting my entire system, right? It's not just affecting like my joints. So I would have all this and I would be so tired I couldn't open my eyes. Not to mention that would happen with the pain that I was experiencing, but it was also happening with being on those immunosuppressive drugs because your body's going through a lot for you to basically be injecting poison into your body, right? Like it's not poison, but in a sense it's a foreign, terrible thing.
Yeah.
And to not have an immune system, I was getting sick all the time. And then I'd have to take a break from my drug and then I'd have a flare up and then I'd go back on the drug and then I'd take a break because I get sick again. And all this, it was just like this whole cycle. And I felt like I had like nobody to talk to throughout all of it. And like one of my other friends that I met in college, he was super supportive. And when I started doing injections, like he would help me because I wasn't afraid of the needle, but the medication itself burns. So like I had a hard time just being like, oh, I'm going to inflict this pain on myself. So he would have to help me with injections. We worked together. So I'd bring it and like my injection to work and my little biohazard container. And it's like, he would do my injections for me. And it was like really, like I finally obviously found people who supported me and understood the struggle that I was going through, but that took a toll as well because it was like, am I really this inconvenience? Like nobody wants to hear me talk about this. Is it valid for me to want to talk about this? Is it like, and the problem is like, it is valid and it sucks that I felt that it wasn't because I definitely held in a lot of stuff that could have been definitely like, I could have had more support if I was expressing myself. But because I unfortunately had an experience with that one roommate who was like talking shit about me behind my back because I can't stop talking about how I'm like exhausted and I feel like shit, like,
Yeah.
you know, and it's
that's such an insecurity, I feel like, for everyone that, I don't know, because you want to talk about it, because you want to, you know, vent it out and also maybe problem solve and, you know, but when it affects you constantly, it's hard, I think, to not feel insecure that like there's going to be a lack of understanding for your behavior and for, you know, and again, different level of thing, but in terms of immune system stuff, I have like Epstein-Barr virus, which, and pretty severely, basically, anytime I get a cold, anytime I get sick in any way, I have mono symptoms, like flu symptoms,
Right.
basically. And you know, when you put that on top of seasonal affective disorder, and something that I've been really struggling with this last month is just feeling sick all the time. And I'm working through this, but I've had the constant need to talk about it because I just feel stuck and stagnant, and if like to not talk about it almost feels like accepting it, which sounds positive, but like it's really scary to feel like it's not going to change. Like it's not, I don't know, for you and I, for people that are problem solvers, like I want to talk about what's going on because I want it to change and I want to do something about it. And I feel like, you know, I often talk things out with people until a solution comes out. And I think it's this mix of all these different behaviors that basically just cause us to like talk about it a lot. And it's, you know, there's a lot to be said about how we deserve to do that and we deserve to have support from that. There's also another side to it that is like how that affects, you know, people around us. It's a
but I also think, I don't mean to cut you off,
your
but,
example is very different. Your example is like,
well, it's all valid
them talking
no matter
shit, you know.
Yeah.
It's, yeah.
But what I think is interesting too is like there's also a healthy amount of like I definitely was thinking about it in an unhealthy way too. Like I definitely was obsessive at certain points because like, you know, but you know, it's hard too, especially I feel like that's such a vital time, you know, in your life in college or just in that age group in general, because you're meeting new people and you're trying to be accepted by new people in general, you know. And I
you
think
want
the
to have
biggest
control
thing,
over how you're perceived.
yeah, and I didn't want to be perceived as this person who's just like miserable all the time, but it's like
Yeah.
I couldn't help but be miserable. I mean, my doctor was like, you should take these meds at the end of the week on Friday or Saturday so that you have a day to recover, because the day after I'd take some of these medications, I would be throwing up and like nauseous the next day, and I'd be so tired I literally
Not what
can't
you
get out of
want on
bed.
Friday and Saturday when
In
you're
college?
No.
I like never went out in college, and then when my friends wanted to take me out to like parties, I was so anxious because I like was like, I don't want to go. I'm nervous about being around people, and then on top of that being like, oh well, I can't really drink on these meds because it's really dangerous for me. So like,
Yeah.
I
it's a lot.
definitely didn't get that full like experience in college where everybody's like, oh, we drink a lot, we party. Not that I'm like needing of that, but like,
No, I know what you mean though.
it feels I feel slightly
adds
like,
more to the other complex.
And I think
just feeling outside.
I guess to kind of round out this whole episode, I guess I should say that I still struggle with this like to this day. There's certain things that I can't do, or that happen that I'm slightly embarrassed of, and it's hard because, like, for example, I still play Pokemon Go. Don't judge me. I love Pokemon Go.
I would never judge you.
But a group of us went to Go Fest a couple of years ago in Chicago in 2019, and it's all walking all day. And I did the best that I could, but had to leave early because I was in so much pain again. It was like that whole, I basically relived that whole experience, that I had for that Patriots Day parade. Like, it was cold and wet because it had rained, and it was like a slightly miserable day despite it being in June, and everybody was like walking around like per usual, but it was just so much I couldn't take it. I was in so much pain. I had to miss dinner that night with everybody. I stayed in my hotel room. I cried like a baby because I was like, oh my god, like, is it coming back? But it wasn't. It was I called my doctor, and he's like, it's probably just you overusing it. And that's when I learned too that like this is probably a side effect of just the damage that I have, and to not freak out every time that my ankles hurt after I overexert them. So the reason I say that is because I don't want this to come off as like, oh, I don't think about it like this anymore. It doesn't affect me anymore, because it still does. And there's still things that I'm going to have to deal with for the rest of my life. And in the back of my mind, it could always come back. So I always have that fear as well. But I think what I've had to do for myself is really learn that it's okay to have like feelings about this and to have it be upsetting, but I can't let it define me, and I've definitely let it kind of define me in the past. But it's really hard, and it's hard for me even to sit here and be like, oh, don't feel sad about these things, because it sucks. And I've had my fair share of why me my entire life. Why me? Why did I have to deal with this? Why am I going through this? How come nobody else has to deal with this? And it's hard to get through that. And again, I don't want to give anybody this false sense of like, I'm 100% accepting of this, because I can genuinely say that I'm not.
No.
And it's just because I feel so like, I have a really, this is one of the only things I have such a hard time with, like, what if I didn't have this?
Yeah.
What if I didn't struggle with this? I'd feel more comfortable about this. And I feel like I've been robbed of certain experiences, and I'm kind of angry. Like, I'm kind of angry about that. Like, that fucking sucks. And I'm sure you can relate with your migraines and being in high school, you know, like.
But from the way that you're talking about it, it reminds me of the ways you've given this metaphor before of like with mental illness, or any negative experience. It's like your life is a jar, and I think you've used like a black marble or a rock or something, is like the grief, I think is what you use it for. And that stays the same, but the jar gets bigger. And it's just that never goes away, but more and more of your life happens, and you become more and more of a person, and that just becomes less and less of a part of you.
Yeah. And I find myself, even to this day, like, refraining from telling people, because I think what I've spent a lot of time doing my entire life is trying to validate my existence. Oh, well, this is happening because I have like this problem, or I'm immediately jumping to it to, like you said, to kind of explain away behaviors or certain things that are going on. But I don't let it define me anymore. I used to be like, oh, I have this. Like, this is one of the first things I'll tell people. I have rheumatoid arthritis, because it's like, let me get this out of the way. Yeah. This uncomfortable conversation where I might be slightly different. But now I'm at a place where it's like, it comes up when it needs to. Like,
Yeah.
hey, by the way, I have rheumatoid arthritis. I have some like joint damage from it, and I'm really uncomfortable right now. So I really think I need to go home, or something like that. You know what I mean? It's like, maybe I haven't told you this before, but I'm not leaving because I don't want to be here. It's because I'm like, I'm hurting. I'm like in pain. And I can't say, I brought up that one example in college just because it was so significant to me to hear somebody say something. It's like, I'm struggling with this, and you're like, that's a shitty example, right? Because that person's just a shitty person, and it turned out she was shitty to everybody. But I really did find support in college with some of my best friends that I still have today, and I think it's important for people to know that you're not alone. And there also are resources. Like, I learned about this group that meets at the hospital that I get treated at like once every month, and I went to one of those, and to hear other people have the same validating, the same experiences was very validating to me, and it validated literally everything for me. I was like, wow, I'm not alone. And I think it's important to like have a community like that if it's available.
Definitely. And also another big thing that I've that I've realized as we're both we're in our later 20s now, with 30s approaching, and we both work with a lot of people that are older, so I'm sure you've seen this as well. Something that, honestly, if there's any good to be taken from a silver lining of having chronic illnesses or mental health issues or being neurodivergent in any kind of way, is it can be a very isolating feeling when you're younger because of how many people don't deal with that. But most adults deal with many of those things. And something I have found is that a lot of people who never had any of that shit growing up are not good at it. Like, so many people older than me are not good at being sick, are not good at navigating their neurodivergence, are not, like, it is a difficult thing that makes you stronger, makes you a more capable person. It's, not to say it's like good, but I don't know, through suffering comes strength, through trauma comes growth.
Builds character.
But,
again, I'd like to emphasize that it doesn't define you.
No.
There is a healthy amount of thinking about it. Because I really did struggle to find that balance of, like, it's okay to worry about this. I don't have to worry about it right now.
Yeah.
And so if you feel like you're kind of obsessing over it, it'd probably be a really good idea to find someone to talk to about it, because it might just be helpful to be able to be like, here's word vomit.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah,
with all of that said,
wait, I have one more thing.
One more thing.
Do it. And I think you were going to lead into it, but I was going to say the other thing that's really helped me is just I pet all the dogs now, and then all my problems go away.
I was going to say that one. I was going to ask what we learned today.
We learned to pet some dogs.
And then I'm going to talk about petting some dogs. Yeah, that's what you got to do. It's important. It's important. You have to do it.
And we love you.
Oh my God, we love you.
We love you so freaking much.
Whoa. We love you and all your ailments and illnesses and chronic
We'll accept
needs.
You for no matter what.
We love you.
We love you so freaking much.
All of that. Yeah. Yeah.
What else did we learn?
Oh, is that not how we're thought that's how we were gonna cap it off.
Jeez. No, we need to recap all the lessons, John.
Well, that's usually okay, so I don't know, pet the dogs and like you're doing great overall. It's important to have a community of support. If you don't have it now, it's going to come back even stronger later in life. So get stoked about that. Try to find it now, but hang in there. hang in there.
And
That's
we
what
love you
today.
again.
And we love you once again. I think
so
that's it.
guys. Well, thanks for listening to us. We hope to.
What a ramble.
I hope you join us again on our adventure here in Mental Sync. Okay, bye.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye. Love you. Bye.
Cool. Okay, are we happy?